something very important happened last night in College Station, Texas. And it's not something, let me rephrase, it's not everything that Texas A&M wanted, but it was everything they needed. They needed to just win against Miami, and they did. Now, the final was 17-9. And I think if you are a future opponent of Texas A&M, you probably watched this game and you saw 37 different things that you think your team's going to be able to exploit and is not going to be good enough to beat your team. Who knows? Maybe you're right. I couldn't care less. They needed a win. It wasn't optional. Last night was not optional. They had to get it. We got what we thought we'd get from this game. We got a Texas A&M win. We got a Texas A&M cover. Now, that final score and that margin really doesn't tell the story. You're looking at a box score if you're watching on YouTube right now. And if I don't give you the final score of this game, does it make a whole lot of sense? You're looking at what I'm looking at? 27-16 first down edge, favor Hurricanes. 392, 264 yardage edge, favor Hurricanes. More passing yards, more rushing yards, time of possession about 8 or 9 minutes, whatever that is. So there were a lot of indicators in the box score that said, Miami, did they outplay Texas A&M? Well, numerically, in some cases they did, but I kept telling you last week when we previewed this game and I said I thought A&M was going to win it, I told you I thought Miami could be very competitive here, but I thought it was too early for them. And I realized in retrospect when a lot of you DM'd me and said, what do you mean by that? I should have gone into further detail. What I meant was I thought the program, the Mario Cristobal Miami program, was too young to go on the road and get this win. And when you watch how they lost, precisely what I was talking about is the reason they couldn't come away with the win. It wasn't that they were non-competitive at all. But I think Mario Cristobal actually said in his postgame, it's not enough to just compete. Like you can compete and still not do the things it takes to win. You've got to execute. Competitors can screw up every play and be playing really hard and screw up every play. But they did not execute well enough. A&M did enough to win. I thought that the moment would be a little bit too big at this point for Miami. Now, here's what else I'll say. This is not a finished product of a team this year. Miami could play this game in November for all I know and end up being good enough to win it. It's not the way college football works. I'm just saying, though, it's a learning experience for them. But they outgained them by 128. They ran 77 plays to A&M's 52, so that was, again, kind of an issue this week for Texas A&M. 27 first downs for Miami and no touchdown. Now, you explain to me how you pull that off. 27 first downs and no touchdown. Critical amounts of drops. Wide receiver corps should be flat out embarrassed for Miami. I'm not saying Tyler Van Dyke played a perfect game by any stretch, but that dude was standing in there, in the fourth quarter especially, standing in there and taking shots and giving you catchable balls. And the same problems Miami's receiver corps had last year and in the spring and in fall camp cropped up, to no surprise, really, of anyone who pays attention to the program. And it may very well have cost him a chance to win. Had critical penalties, mental miscues, so that's how Miami lost the game. But A&M won the game. It was very critical. There were 3 things that happened this week that I want you to really pay attention to because I think these 3 things will matter moving forward. It's not just a yesterday thing. Number 1, Jimbo Fisher did indeed change starting quarterbacks. So Max Johnson started for him. Didn't light the world on fire. The best way I would describe it is they just looked more functional with him at quarterback. I just felt a little better. Again, it's not a huge statistical day. That's never the case when you score 17 points. But they did enough to win. I felt more comfortable watching them, I guess is the best way to describe that. Number 2, Texas A&M bought themselves another week. If they lost yesterday, it would have been a disaster. They bought themselves another week. What I mean by that is I am not a believer that teams are finished versions of themselves in September. It's very much a developmental game. At the college level, way more than the pro level. The pro level, sometimes you just are what you are in the first month of the season. But the good teams, especially the ones with really deep talent rosters, they buy themselves the opportunity to get better, to start getting into what we call ascension mode. Now, A&M's not there yet, but it's a team with the capability to be there. So, for instance, they win yesterday, 17-9, unimpressive to you, maybe. But what if we fast forward to November 5th and they've only lost one more game, or maybe they haven't lost a game, and all of a sudden they're in the mid-30s every week, and they're averaging 2-to-1 ratios offensively of the statistical outliers that they're putting up right now, and all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, wow, if they lost that Miami game back several years ago, it seems like now, if they lost that game, they might have been written off for dead, but they won that game. I didn't realize it at the time, but they bought themselves some time, and somehow it clicked. That Max Johnson change at quarterback, bringing some of those hurt guys back and some of those suspended guys back, I'll talk about in a second. All of a sudden, now A&M looks good. Wow. Who would have thought it? Well, it's college football. Anyone who's watched it is who should have thought it. I'm not saying it's a guarantee with them. I'm saying they bought themselves another week to give themselves the opportunity to get into that mode. The third thing that happened, which you may have saw a headline about, was Jimbo Fisher suspended several guys before this game. Now, when I saw the headline, I was down at Auburn. So I said, that's interesting. Some of them were the same ones that were in the news earlier this week. When I say news, I mainly mean the hardcore college football news. You didn't see this lead the NBC Nightly News or anything like that. I don't think it got on Lester Holt's radar, but I do know that a number of the guys that were suspended, I think it was 4 of them, true freshmen, and guys that would have played, a couple of them would have played yesterday. And I thought Jimbo Fisher, for curfew-related reasons, by the way, was why they got suspended. I thought he did what he had to do. Now, after the fact, everyone says, oh, of course, yeah, you got to suspend him. Well, no, you don't have to. Now, I want some of you to try and put yourselves in his position. It should be a non-negotiable. I agree with you on that. If you're saying that to your screen right now, you said, what point are you trying to make? They broke the rules, they get suspended. Well, here's what I'd like you to do. Try and imagine it, because hardly any of us are ever going to be in this position. Imagine being paid $8 or $9 million a year, having the weight of the world on your shoulders, having had a disaster last week, and having contributing members of your team break what some would call a minor rule. They didn't go out and rob a convenience store. They broke curfew. There's a way that you could handle that where no one in the public finds out about it. And there's a way you could tell them, look, you'll just run hills for me during the week, but I'm not going to suspend you over this. He could have done that. He didn't. Now, they won the game without those guys. I have a sneaking suspicion that some of the more veteran layers of that team really appreciate how that was handled. I think they were integral in it being handled that way. And I also think that every single one of those kids who got suspended will be better for it, or the program will be better for it, because they will be filtered out for not responding positively to justified punishment. Either way, that's the kind of stuff that resonates in a locker room. When you bring in guys as part of a true freshman class that's the highest rated of all time, and they get a little sideways during the week with some things they like on Twitter and some comments they make and some videos they post, and then they break curfew, and it doesn't matter if we got a must-win game Saturday or not. They're not here. They're not starting. They're not playing. Good. It's the way it should have been handled. I'm just saying it's not as simple as that. And there are coaches out there who would have cut that corner because they were in that must-win situation. Jimbo Fisher didn't, so my hat's off to him. Programs from coast to coast, by the way, and I wanted to make this comment before I move on. I hope you watched some of this game last night. And those of you who were fortunate enough to be there, I talked to a couple of our viewers from South Florida who traveled there for the Miami game. They could not stop talking about the environment. It is very popular to make fun of Texas A&M. Now, as I told you last year, and I have reiterated several times, I love that place, so I will always defend them. I always laugh when they post videos of like Midnight Yell, and they post videos of various traditions they have around here, and everyone makes fun of it because it's just the popular thing to do, and they either defend it or they just brush it off like they don't care. Because once I went out there, I got it, and I appreciate it. I couldn't care less if no one else does it like that. How in the world are you going to talk about being a college football fan and about how much you love the unique cultures and traditions around this country, and then make fun of unique culture and tradition when you see it, just because it's not what you do in Minnesota or you do in Virginia or California? It's not supposed to be what you do. That's what college football is supposed to be. They don't crank Enter Sandman when they run onto Kyle Field. You know why? It's not their thing. But you also don't do the Aggie War hymn in Orlando, Florida, because it's not your thing. Who cares? Appreciate it for what it is. You make fun of it, and I look at it and I say, there's a lot of programs around the country who could learn a thing or two from what they just did last week. I want you to remember that App State loss was one of the most embarrassing losses in the history of that football program. And those folks went and all they did was immediately sell out the next week's game, and they created a spectacle of a home environment. It was a massive recruiting weekend for them. They knocked it out of the park, and they, for the umpteenth time, put a display on national television that represents everything that a lot of us love about this game more than any other game that exists out there. So I'll credit the A&M folks if no one else will. Congratulations on the win. They got Arkansas this week. It's in Dallas. It's a neutral site game, obviously. A&M opened as a 2.5-point favorite. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me. That's how we keep this entire thing free.